Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night, because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. Now, stone doesn't sound very comfortable as a pillow for me. I'm assuming he must have covered it with his cloak or with some leaves or something. I don't know. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it, or there beside him, stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord. That's that capital uppercase Lord. So that's Jehovah there. That's the word being used. The God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. So there he is again, emphasizing that land promise. And remember, when Moses is speaking this out loud to his readers or his hearers, those are the people who are supposed to actually be taking that land in the present tense. Here it's being spoken of in the future tense. This is going to happen someday. When Moses is speaking this out loud to his original audience, he's that's their time. It's their present day. That's not a future application as it was to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. To Moses' day, to the audience of Moses' day, it's present. And the reason why they don't have that land is because they messed up. At least that's what I believe. I believe that as Moses would have been reading this out loud, I think he would have raised his voice a little bit and emphasized that to his hearers. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, and to the west, of course, is the Mediterranean Sea, so they're going to have to get around that somehow. To the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you, and I will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place. But I was not aware of it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. So there must have been a city nearby. He's not in a city. He's obviously lying in some sort of empty field. I guess. Maybe he's lying outside in the streets. I don't think he'd be doing that. But there must have been a city nearby that was called Luz. He named the place Bethel, and then when the Israelites took over, it became known as Bethel. And the name Luz faded away, I guess. By the way, Bethel means house of God. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my father's house, then the Lord will be my God. That's that Lord there. It says God's father's house, the Lord. And this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And all that you give me, I will give you a tenth. The house and the Lord might be my God. So anyway, the Lord there is capital L-O-R-D, Lord. That's Jehovah. So he's using the name, saying, if you, Jehovah, will be my God, then I will give you a tenth. Okay, so what exactly is happening here? It's easy, I think, to kind of fly over the story and not really catch the significant implications of it. Of course, we're often used to thinking of this as a ladder, Jacob's ladder. Here it's called a stairway. They have the word ladder in the footnotes down there. Is it in the King James Version? I'm not sure. Like over the years, it's been popularly envisioned as a ladder. Stairway would be more fitting because what he's probably dreaming of, like the specific image that is probably in his mind in this dream, is probably the steps of a ziggurat type temple leading up to the sky. Okay, in that day and time, and for centuries afterwards, all around the world, literally anywhere you go in the world, you'll find the same phenomenon. The people always had the idea that to get to God, you have to get up high. You have to climb a mountain to get to God or the gods or whatever. Okay, that's why they made temples. That's why they made ziggurats. You see it in Mesopotamia. You see it in the Central and South American cultures. You see it, of course, in Egypt. They built pyramids. Those were actually tombs. But the Tower of Babel was most likely a ziggurat temple. And even later on in Israel, they're going to put their shrines up on these high places, these hilltops. Okay, so there was this constant idea that you have to get up high in order to get to God. The higher up you go, the closer you get to God. This idea that God apparently lived in the sky or lived above the sky or whatever. And Jacob would be familiar with that. That would be what he would think too. So he's probably envisioning a staircase or a stairway reminiscent of the steps of a ziggurat temple. Now, the thing about these temples is that on top of the temples, there would have been a worship site. There would have been a shrine or an altar or something. And that's where you went to go worship your God. All right. Again, later on in Israel's history, they're going to put these shrines and these altars on these high places, these hilltops, and they're going to worship there. They're going to worship their false gods there. They're going to worship the real God there. And sometimes that'll be a problem, and sometimes it won't be. But there is this constant idea that that's where you go to do your worship. You go on top of a hill. You go on top of a mountain. Or you build a ziggurat temple on top of a hilltop, and you have to climb that ziggurat temple to get to the shrine on top. And that's where you conduct your worship. So that's just ubiquitous everywhere. I mean, everywhere in the world you would find that. And so Jacob is probably thinking, like, that's probably what he's thinking about, is a staircase. And the idea is that at the top of that temple, where you had your worship site, your holy site, that's where your God lived. That's where your God dwelled. So Jacob is in awe here because he had this dream of this temple, this staircase, which connected where he was, the bottom of the staircase, to God at the top. And these angels were coming up and down the ladder. And so, like, that's why he says this is the gateway to heaven. Like, this spot where he's dreaming, this dream, is the contact point between where he is and where God is. Now, Jacob's understanding of this is somewhat primitive. When Jesus starts his ministry, we'll read about this in John 1. He's going to say to Nathanael, I saw you sitting under the fig tree. And Nathanael's going to say, that's amazing. And he's going to say, you're going to see greater things than this. You're going to see heaven open and angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man, by which he refers to himself. So he's referring specifically to this dream of Jacob's ladder or staircase, which Nathanael would have been familiar with. All the Jews would have been. Nathanael may even have been reading when he was sitting under the tree and Philip went to go meet him. He might even have been reading that section of Scripture, who knows, about Jacob. And Jesus is saying that I am now the contact point, the gateway between heaven and earth. I am now the ladder. I am now the staircase. I am now the way to get to God that you can use to get to God. It's through me. So that is what that means. Like, it means so Jacob's understanding is primitive. His understanding of this dream is primitive. Okay, that's not his fault. That's what he knew. All right, that's the amount of revelation that he had at that point in time. I talked a moment ago or the previous video, about this unfolding revelation of God. Like, that was the revelation he had at that time. In his mind, in his view, you had to climb a mountain or climb a temple on top of a mountain to get to God. And so when God came to him in this dream to let him know that he was going to be with him, that's how he came to him. He came to him in a vision about angels ascending and descending, the pathway between Jacob and God. And that's how it made sense to Jacob. Okay, when Jesus talks to Nathanael, he's saying, I'm going to be the contact point, the gateway between heaven and earth. you'll see heaven opened and angels and ascending and descending on the Son of Man, which is me. And so that's how Jesus opened Nathanael's eyes to who he really was. So this is all part of the continued unfolding revelation of God. So Jacob's understanding of what this means is primitive. God's contact point with earth is not limited to this site in Bethel. Jacob may have thought it was. Okay, he puts this stone there, he anoints it with oil, he makes this vow, this oath about God bringing him back, which he will do 20 years later. Okay, and Jacob's understanding of this concept may have been that this spot is where God connects with earth. Like this is it, like this is the spot. Again, that's not actually accurate. God is everywhere. He connects with earth whenever he wants to, however he wants to. Jesus, of course, serves as the ultimate gateway between heaven and earth, between God and man. But God's presence, his connection to earth, is not limited to just that one physical site. Just like in the future, it won't be limited to the temple. God's name will take up residence in that temple, but God's presence is not limited to that temple, or the tabernacle before that. And so this is this is a concept that we really don't emphasize very much in our teaching and in our preaching. But this is basically Jacob is expressing such awe here because he thinks he is at the spot where God connects with earth. He's actually, again, not really right about that, but in his mind that makes sense. Like that's what he is so in awe of here. We can easily read over this section and not even really understand it or really grasp what is being said here. Again, there's nothing specific about that particular site. Jacob thinks there is, but there really isn't. That this is just a part of the process of unfolding the revelation of God. God's intent from the beginning all the way until the end is to be with man. Okay, that's something that I think a lot of us really have a hard time with. I think Jacob had a hard time with it. Okay, I have a hard time with it. Like that's, if we just the people, if we believe in God at all, a lot of times it's even those who really do believe, even those who are genuinely do believe. A lot of times we conceive of it or conceive of him as though he's like distant from us, like he's way up there, and it's unapproachable, unreachable. What would he ever want to? And it's just like that's how. I mean, that's just how our perception is. Like it takes a lot to get us to realize that God actually wants to be with us. So God's intent, his desire, the whole reason why he made mankind is to be with us. He made this world for us to dwell in it, and he made us for him to dwell with us. And he wants to dwell with us. He wants to be with us. Like that's his goal. That's been his goal from the beginning. He doesn't want there to be this separation or these boundaries or this gap, I should say, between us and him. Like he is working to correct that. Again, this meeting point between heaven and earth, like he's signaling to Jacob that he's coming to be with Jacob. He was with Abraham, he was with Isaac. I think Jacob's faith apparently was not very strong for much of his life. He was a deceiver. He got what he wanted through guile and gumption. I mean, he's in his 70s here. And it doesn't seem as though he really began to take God's promises for himself seriously until pretty late. Even here, it's, I think he believes in God, Jehovah. I think he believes in the God of Abraham and Isaac, but it doesn't seem as though he's really connected with him yet at this stage in his life. And so God is giving him this vision or this dream of this meeting point, this connection point, to strengthen his faith and tell him that I'm going to be with you like I was with Isaac, like I was with Abraham. And again, that promise will end up extending to more than just Jacob and more than just that spot. So anyway, I wanted to go ahead and